There we go, everybody. We are live. Good morning on this rather chilly Wednesday. But from us, a warm welcome. Really a warm welcome to everyone to the second in our series of tomorrow's beautiful webinars with today's topic, Life After Lockdown Scenarios for South Africa, with senior futurist and professor, author, entrepreneur, Prof. Chris Ardendorff. Colleagues, as we approach the 1st of June to transition to the stage 3 of the lockdown, there are obviously so many questions that still remain. What will the future hold for us, socially, economically, etc.? Now, today, to put some perspective on possible, probable, plausible, and if I may add, preferred futures, Prof. Ardendorff will share some of his insights and in a scientific manner. Futures is not about prophesying the future or foretelling anything. It's about using and applying scientific methodologies. So, friends, just by way of introduction, Professor Chris Ardendorff is a senior futurist and a professor at various business schools and universities across the globe. So as a professional futurist, he specializes in future studies, the fourth industrial revolution, scenario and strategic planning, governance, turnarounds, and of course, entrepreneurship. Chris boasts 3 doctoral degrees, colleagues. He's an author of more than 10 books, has published over 100 academic articles, and he's on the board of about 7 international institutions or associations from the future study, in the future study realm, as well as entrepreneurship, innovation, and so forth. And last but not least, he's also on South Africa's Presidential Commission for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So without any further ado, colleagues, our main attraction for today, futurist, entrepreneur, Professor Chris Ardendorff. Over to you, Chris. Looking forward to what you have to share with us.
Thank you very much, Kobus. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share some ideas. I'm sure most of you are tired of this lockdown, and I'm sure most of you can't wait to get out of it. But the big question always arises is what happens after lockdown? How are we going to start getting ourselves geared for future business? How the economy is going to affect it, all those kind of aspects. So without further ado, please bear with me for the 45 minutes as we go forward. We looked at 3 possible scenarios for South Africa after lockdown. Now, generally, when people think about scenarios, they think, what a romantic idea, how easy it's to do it, etc., etc. But trust me, it's taken me almost this 4 to 5 months to scan the environment in terms of what's actually really happening, and then also made use of my editor at the end of the day, not to be too scientific and how we move forward, to come up with the 3 scenarios. So I'm going to start quite broadly where we find ourselves, and then narrow it down in terms of the 3 scenarios that we will actually be presenting. However, what becomes very important is that as futurists around the world, we make use of the genetic foresight model. In other words, things are happening around the big wide world. We all know about the fake news. We all know about 5G. We hear this story, and we hear all the type of stories. But how can we actually scramble through all this information to come up with a true prognosis? What seems to be happening, what's really happening, and what might happen at the end of the day. It becomes our foresight for intelligence, where we analyze everything, how we interpret it, and what becomes our perspective at the end of the day. And on top of that, our output becomes this: what might we need to do? And therefore, whether it's a country strategy, whether it's for South Africa, globally, World Economic Forum, for your organization, for your personal attributes, what will we do, and how will we actually do at the end of the day? So it's quite a process in terms of getting to the actual scenarios And I must say, ladies and gentlemen, these are not normative scenarios. These are explorative scenarios, because doing scenarios for COVID-19 is an incredibly difficult task to do, because we're talking about one specific item that affects mankind, but it's got multiple spin-offs. How it affects the economy, how it affects politics, how it affects the socials of our people. What are the new technologies? What are the environmental factors? What are the legalities coupled to all of this? Because this is what we call becoming the new norm. And as Professor Andre Roux always argued from from Stellenbosch University indicated, there are more than one future. And the future is not predetermined. We actually do have alternatives. And the future is not predictable. We actually have choices. And the future can be influenced, ladies and gentlemen. Our choices and actions today have consequences for future generations. But as Maslow indicated and argued, we need to act wisely in the present, and there is a certain amount of responsibility towards that. So we make use of the futures cone. And as Cobus was mentioning, all the 6 P's in it, there are many possibilities. If we look from today into the future, we'll see there are many potential, everything beyond the present moment as we experience from COVID-19. There are possible futures, many possible futures, based on our future knowledge, what might happen. Plausible futures based on current knowledge, what actually could happen. And then we have the probable futures based on current trends likely to happen. And also, as indicated by Cobus, the preferable futures based on value judgments, what we want to happen, should happen. And then there's also the projected future, the default extrapolated baseline business as usual future. But on the red, you'll see the prosperities, what is impossible, what would never happen. As futurists, we say, we always ask ourselves the questions, what if? And secondly, never say never. Those are regarded as either wildcards or black swans as we know it around the world. But as Darwin indicated, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. Hence again, COVID-19 posed no difference for us. How we adapt to this change becomes what will be regarded as critical success factors going forward. Therefore, it's very important with this COVID-19 that we get out of our comfort zones. We need to address the fear zones where we lack the confidence, find excuses, and are affected by others' opinions, and particular in terms of fake news. We need to move towards the learning zone. How are we going to learn and adapt according to this COVID-19 and life after that? Deal with the challenges and problems, acquire those new skills within 4IR, and extend our comfort zone so that we can move our country and organizations and businesses and our family lives to a growth zone, where we find a true purpose, live our dreams, set new goals, and conquer those objectives. One thing that we have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, with COVID-19 excluded, we still find ourselves in the 4th Industrial Revolution. And let's have a look at this definition, because it becomes incredibly important. And we'll find that the 4th Industrial Revolution will be accelerated by the smart technologies that's blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres, collectively referred to as cyber-physical systems that has a direct impact on smart business models. In true reality, ladies and gentlemen, countries are always regarded as a smart business model, or we should aspire to become a smart country as we move forward. COVID-19 is actually accelerating us in thinking, how do we actually adapt within 4IR? And these smart technologies are developing rapidly and merging, testing traditional means of economic growth. Responses to technological change as we experience will determine the shape of economic process through smart business models. And the 4IR presents a turning point for human development as a rapid pace of technological change tests social cohesion, demands bold policy responses in order to foster innovation, better develop sound economic policy, increase productivity prudently. So it's very important, ladies and gentlemen, the complexities that we find ourselves in within a 4IR. you will see the differences between the first, second, third industrial revolution out of effect, and the changes we'll experience within 4IR. In true reality, ladies and gentlemen, according to the World Economic Forum, it already started in 2012. So we are 8 years down the line. But the changes we can experience within 4IR, with the next towards 2030 to 2035, as we know it, will be more so felt than the first, second, and third industrial revolution combined. So the time factor and the speed of change will be much more instrumental. And the 4IR is also driven by the systematic transformation of technology, information, and innovation. And it happens, ladies and gentlemen, on a global scale. And there are 4 primary factors driving this industrialization of ours. And these factors will reshape our industries and will transform many facets of societies and human lifestyle. We can see the effects that COVID-19 has forced us to go online. And digital intelligence, such as these platforms, will play an incredibly important role as we move forward. So the 4 primary factors of the 4IR is emerging catalytic technologies, or the smart technologies we're talking about, machine learning, the speed of change of what I was referring to, and the global scale of 4IR as we move forward. But as you and I know it, also brings more and more inequality, particularly in the potential to disrupt our labor markets. And the resource for any area driven by smart technologies will be those people who can create new ideas and innovations, and how we adapt. In future, ladies and gentlemen, talent more than capital will represent a critical factor for production. And the quest for talent will give rise to the job market as we know it. So the big question always posed, the future of jobs, how will it actually be affected? And particularly now with the effects and the aftermath that we experience from COVID-19. The general perception is, ladies and gentlemen, from futurists and experts around the world, that by 2030, 2 billion jobs as we know it, as of today, will have disappeared, freeing talent for many new fledgling industries to embark. Now, in general terms, ladies and gentlemen, there'll be 8 billion people towards the year 2030, which gives us an indication that it's more like 40 to 50% of jobs, as we know it as of today, will disappear within 4IR. And a general rule of thumb amongst futurists and specialists, that 60% of jobs, 10 years up now, haven't actually even been invented yet. More on a positive note, you can determine statistically that we'll actually have 10% more jobs towards 2030 than currently exist, but all around the smart technologies and the 4IR drivers for change moving us forward. We can already see, ladies and gentlemen, the World Economic Forum indicated that the emerging growth globally will change by 2022. 133 million jobs will be created in the top 10 from data analysts, from digital transformation specialists, IT services, organization development specialists, new technology specialists. And we can already see the difference between 75 million people will get affected by the declining roles of the global change by 2022. We can see the data entry clerks, accounting, bookkeeping, and payrolls, all the way down to postal service clerks. So, hence, we can actually determine from that the changes we can experience in a very short space of time, because the COVID effects we will definitely feel still by 2022, 2023, as we're going to see from the scenarios. Just some thought for consideration, some thought for food. If we apply 4IR, the new game will be to find the fastest way to teach and retrain our people moving forward. Let's look at some global economic drivers for change. And I thought I'll share this recovery alphabet with all of us, where we as economists compare the shape of potential recovery to the letters of the alphabet as we know it. The V-shaped recovery that many economists are talking about, the economy recovers but activity is permanently lost. The U-shaped recovery is where GDP recovers, but slower than the V-shape. And the bottom middle, you see the W-shaped recovery that many economists are referring to, is the restrictions lifted too soon. and GDP suffers as more cases paralyzes the economy. And at the bottom right, you'll see the L-shaped recovery, where the economy never fully recovers after COVID-19. It's very important to remember these as we discuss the scenarios moving forward. In hindsight, ladies and gentlemen, for some time now, futurists have been sounding the alarm of possible impending pandemics. It's nothing new. The most significant one comes to mind is when President Barack Obama was indicating this already in 2005, 2015 already, and as well as various economists, futurists, and specialists indicating that there could be economic and stock market crises that might hit globally by the year 2020s. We have good reason to forecast that the economic crisis is going to be more devastating than the last one in 2008. The markets, ladies and gentlemen, have thus far given us only a glimpse of what is to come. So the markets are becoming more and more volatile with COVID-19. And the economic crisis could be more severe than the COVID-19 pandemic itself. Some food to think about. We should witness a renaissance that will herald a global Marshall-like economic plan, leading to a global economic recovery to prosperity. And just based on the above and hindsight, our best advice is to prepare for prolonged recessions, possibly depressions, even if it might not happen. Best prepared, we are taking all these considerations into factor. What I did is I looked at what the big wide world is saying in terms of environmental scanning for COVID-19. And the big question always comes up, and there are two different schools of thought. People calling it a black swan on the one side, and or a wild card as we know it, and some indicating that it is not a black swan. Nassim Taleb coined the concept. And the black swans are outliers, things that are totally outside the way beyond our observations. And they appear to come out of the blue. They are very fragile to miscalculations with a general severe underestimation mixed on an occasional severe overestimation. And then on the other hand is the big question, is COVID-19 not possibly a black elephant? Developed from the notion of an elephant in the room as we know it. A black elephant, as noted by Vinjay Gupta, is an event which is extremely likely and widely forecast by futurists and other experts. But people attempt to pass it off as a black swan when it finally happens. In line with Gupta's concept, Markley argued that such events are high probability and high impact, as seen by experts if present trends continue, but low credibility for non-expert stakeholders. In my personal mind, ladies and gentlemen, this is regarded as a black elephant and not a black swan. The world's #1 futurist, Professor Sohail Inayatullah, also widely argued in his published paper that this is not a black swan. So let's look at what the big wide world is saying in terms of the COVID-19 trend lines. First, it's a very expensive crisis in all of history. We are nowhere close to putting together a final tally for this crisis, but rest assured, it will be massive. It is a global in nature and it could close many, many businesses all at the same time. And secondly, it's rewriting the rulebook for dealing with future crises. We now have a new rulebook in place for dealing with future contagions and at the same time setting the stage for future problems that mankind will experience. Number 3 is a big reset button for planet Earth. At number 4, the economic pandemic will be far more painful than the virus pandemic. The coronavirus is more economically contagious than it is medically contagious. Death rates from bad economies, hunger can easily make virus death rates appear to be insignificant by comparison. Bankruptcies, homelessness, suicides, hunger, petty theft, and other criminal activities will skyrocket. Social distancing has suddenly become the new norm, as we know it. Number 6, the new powers of the elected officials, as we experience it around the globe. This is the first time in history, ladies and gentlemen, that governments have told private businesses to close. The first time. And governments are now exerting far more power and control than any other time in human history. Number 7, the biggest job transition shift as we experience in all of history. Business interruptions are extremely messy and layoffs are mounting as day by day. Some will view this as great times to switch careers, while others will think are only starting with their own new businesses. It is safe to say that job losses followed by re-employment trends will be far different from anything in the past as we know it. We can already see from the World Trade Center predicts the potential impact of COVID-19 on the global travel and tourism sector. Up to 50 million jobs are at risk globally, and it represents a reduction between 12 and 14% globally. And international travel, as we know it, could adversely be impacted by about 25% this year, equivalent to a loss of 3 months of travel. Number 8, the increasing awareness of the world. China's rules. Once China focused on dealing with the coronavirus, they formulated a game plan that would be replayed in every other country around the world. And if the virus has started anywhere else in the world, we might be talking a different and radically different approach. And the coming reinvention of healthcare as we know it and as we can imagine. And number 10, our travel and airline industries will be completely different as we know it. And education, such as these platforms, is undergo some more life-changing trends. We are now seeing the digital classroom being implemented on a global scale. Remote and digital education is certainly not new. Educational programs have been around for more than a decade. But how long before we switch in constantly between digital and physical classrooms? This will be the perfect time to digitize, dematerialize, and demonetize and democratize education as we know it. We'll see a transformation in retail. We already see delivering businesses will shine, such as Uber Eats, as we move forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the digital transformation and hence what we call as futurist digital intelligence that will drive us forward within 4IR. We'll see flexibility, adaptability, and resilience as a new norm. As we dip into survival mode around the world, we will all need to hone our skills in areas of flexibility, adaptability, and resilience. They are not easy to teach, nor easy to learn. Future employers will prioritize them to some of the key skills when they are hiring. And then we also have the unintended consequences of COVID-19 will be epic. When dystopian thinking and transformational thinking collide, great things can actually happen. We're about to enter a most innovative period in all history. Millions of new businesses will be created towards 2030 and millions of new products launched, millions of new services transformed. So on the positive side, ladies and gentlemen, there are hope for all of us. But how coronavirus will speed up the 4IR as we know it and as we can currently experience it as we move forward. COVID-19 is forcing the worlds of business and education to embrace many of the tools that we have been avoiding. These smart technologies that we talk about underlying 4IR include cloud computing, AI, Internet of Things, digital collaboration, blockchain, and virtual workspaces. However, most businesses and educational institutions have avoided them until now, or at least ignored them, as they believe they always still work the best. However, as much as AI, robotics, and the likes of 3D printing are touted as being the leading edge of 4IR, it is the relatively simple process of making any organization's process digital that will drive the 4IR. And the benefits of remote working will be the most visible outcome of that process and what we've actually experienced moving forward. So how do we make sense of the world after COVID-19? And the big question is, what will the world look after coronavirus? So I propose 6 mega trends leading to the scenarios. What we've done is we've looked at various institutions around the world, the McKinseys, the Deloittes, all the organizations that does research, and we've looked at the various trends. And I proposed 6 mega trends. And we also looked at the uncertainties. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, it sounds very romantic, developing scenarios, but it's a big process that's actually involved. And then we categorize them in an initial shock of COVID-19, the recovery once after COVID-19, and the world after. So it's a comprehensive list that we actually went through all the uncertainties and how they actually fit in with our 6 mega trends. So at number 1, the big mega trend is economy and trade. And I split it up into the next 3 years, and then from 2023 to 2025, as we know it, for the life after COVID. So the global economy is expected to increase by about 6% annually for the next 2 to 3 years. This decline is mainly as a result of developing economies and a 44% GDP decline. The developed economies, however, will decline at 10 to 15% per year, and are anticipated to slow down to approximately 3% down the line. At the moment, the global economy is facing many threats. Most significant, which is the rise of protectionism, trade wars, and economic sanctions, further pandemics, the crisis between China and USA, escalating a great power conflict, and at least a temporary end of globalization, strengthening of deglobalization. From 23 to 25, the trends indicate that numerous international economic authorities estimate that the global economy could see then a GDP growth path in the medium term. Nevertheless, the requirements for this development is that protectionism, trade wars, and other risks will fail to materialize. On this US front, the US presidential elections will continue to have a significant impact on the global economy as we know it. And it's likely, ladies and gentlemen, that China will continue its rise towards being the largest economy in the world, and it'll take the lead for global control of the world's basic raw materials at least, but also in Africa's economic progress. The advancement of various 4IR technologies, such as AI, blockchain, and Internet of Things, and their commercialization. Megatrend number 2, working and living as we experience it. A constant change is taking place in working life, which manifests, for example, the need of flexibility, lean thinking, and dividing assignments into macro and micro tasks and teams, and the rising significance of inner motivation and autonomy as the primary models for completing work, as well as the effort towards real-time evaluation and monitoring. In addition, flexible and active cooperation with others, continuous learning, and the ability to master the larger picture and foresight skills, as well as team coordination, are all skills which are required more and more and more often. 2023 to 2025, in the medium term, the regulations concerning work life will become more flexible in most cases, and old structures and hierarchies will be dismantled. Also, in many places, the chief benefits and subsidies and protection given to particular professions or companies are likely to be reduced, and the power of markets increased. Unemployment, employment, and retirement will be dealt with in a more flexible manner, which will materialize as experiments in basic income, as well as re-evaluations of retirement benefits and models, and their funding will be addressed. AI will become further linked with new services, vehicles, and production processes, thus increasing the capabilities of individual people and teams, reducing the routine tasks, and eliminating overlaps. Our megatrend number 3 from 6, services and consumerism. What we experience at the moment, ladies, is the platform economy, such as what we are dealing with and presenting through now. The platform economy will remain a dominant change driver in the service industry, rapidly dismantling several existing service production and delivery-related value chains. The sharing economy, made possible by the platform economy, will create new kinds of business models, which to some extent reduce the profitability in conventional businesses, but on the other hand, offer better visibility, strong cooperation channels, and a chance to leverage the benefits of scalability. Consumers' expectations for uniqueness, scalability, and automation and smart business models of service are growing continually between 2023 and 25. An increasing number of service providers will join larger alliances and business ecosystems, which in the best case will gradually develop into new eras of businesses. Some good examples, ladies and gentlemen, is the passenger economy, the holistic service packages aimed at homes, And these are based on smart platform providing reachability, ease of use, and trust, and which numerous private service providers and their products will become to the fore. Mega trend number 4, how it affects our industry and manufacturing. Accelerating 4I improvements and various services rapidly changed manufacturing technologies and practice between 2020 and 2023. For instance, advances in automation, robotics, and big data are powerful transformation drivers. Furthermore, broadening energy and material solutions are pivotal in a world of increasingly demands on efficiency. Also, machine learning, ladies and gentlemen, the Internet of Things, real-time monitoring are gradually becoming part of process in some more pioneering sectors and manufacturing industries as we experience it. And what we can expect from 2023 to 25 in the medium term is that the key drivers in manufacturing industry will be machine learning, sensing, monitoring, processes automated and optimized by the Internet of Things. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen, control over the entire supply chain will become more critical as we currently already experience. And additionally, bio and nanotechnology, the circular economy, demand for zero energy and utilization of solutions provided by augmented reality will drive the industry towards new practices. And local manufacturing, rapid recycling, and fast transportation of goods from manufacturing plants to the end user will also become more and more visible gradually in our industrial operations as we know it. And the fifth mega trend is our society and the preparedness. In the near future, an increasing number of people will become more dissatisfied as we currently experience with the present regulations because they feel that the legislation controls their lives excessively and that some of the laws might not even be detrimental and some laws might be detrimental. For example, the formation of new tax base. Because once we move out of this COVID-19, countries run on a tax base, and also the competitiveness of any country, including South Africa's innovation environment. Also, demands to ease of administrative practice will probably increase in most countries. It's also very likely, ladies and gentlemen, that we will experience several efforts to experiment in new kinds of decision-making and income formation models. Numerous regulations concerning public administration and itself and its practices will most likely change between 23 and 25 in the medium term. Naturally, the changes will vary from country to country, but it is very probable that most adjustments will have something to do with leveraging digitalization, increasing the transparency of decision-making, easing regulation, utilizing artificial intelligence, big data, and Internet of Things, as well as producing real-time information and basing decision-making on it. And these changes will also be strongly related to reducing bureaucracy and administration, cutting costs, favoring a client-centered approach instead of a system-centered one, and in many countries, preventing corruption and nepotism as we move forward. And our last mega trend is health and well-being. After all, countries are run by people and the societies that we actually serve. The more affluent members of society are displaying an increasingly interest in their health and various means of improving their health and well-being as we know it. The requirements for health become steadily higher. They were more prepared to use their money for sustaining their fitness. Also, they are adopting proactively a diverse range of devices for monitoring the physical functions and the shape. Meanwhile, the prospects for the less health-conscious part of the population are deteriorating, and it's possible that some of them cannot expect to live as long and healthier a life as their wealthier counterparts. Hence, it becomes very important for our country, ladies and gentlemen, how do we look after the poor and our health systems as we move forward. And in the medium term, responsibility for the maintenance and care of one's health will become more critical. Treatments will become more gradually customer-centered and reliant on automation. At the same time, augmentation and the capabilities of the human body through technological and electrical attachment will start becoming more feasible as we know it. Which brings us to the 3 scenarios that I've developed. Now, I hope and pray some of the older people will still remember the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Wild West, those fantastic movies which has come out, and most of them were still in black and white. But at the end of the day, I thought we find ourselves in the Wild West. We don't know what to experience at the moment. So hence again, I came up with 3 macro scenarios for up until 2022 and 2023. And my key uncertainties that I've chosen on the horizontal line, ladies and gentlemen, we either have on the left-hand side poor containment of this COVID-19, or I'm more on the positive side, whether we'll have the global eradication of this COVID-19 as we know it. On the vertical side, we'll either have, on a positive note, more economic stabilization, and if things go worse, the worsening of the economic downturn. Hence again, I brought my scenarios on the one that's based on the good scenario, where we will have economic stabilization and global eradication of COVID-19. On the left-hand side, the bad scenario, we will have economic stabilization, but poor containment of COVID-19 and further outbreaks. On the bottom left, ladies and gentlemen, the ugly scenario, we will have poor containment of COVID-19 and further outbreaks, but also we'll experience a worsening economic downturn, as it were. We could bring in a fourth scenario to make it more scientific, and as Prof. Kobus will also indicate to you that the scientists we most probably make use of 4, but for the exercise and what I was tasked to do is to come up with 3 scenarios. But the fourth scenario could be where we have global eradication of COVID-19, but we could experience a worsening economic downturn. But for this exercise, we focus on the 3. The only aspect that we basically brought in, ladies and gentlemen, our drivers for change, I also incorporated the 4th Industrial Revolution as explained in the beginning of this presentation. So we will have the good, the bad, and the ugly as we move forward. So let's have a look at the good scenario. Basically, just in summary, economic stabilization, global eradication of COVID-19, that could be a picture we're playing ourselves in. But what I've done is I asked what-if questions that senior futurists make use of. I looked at all the questions that all these scientific and futurists and research organizations ask around the world. In the good scenario, the what-if questions is, what if the COVID-19 pandemic eases sooner than actually anticipated? What if the effective and faster testing are done to contain the virus and lead us out of the crisis phase in the next few months? And what if we have been hurt, but the economic impacts can be regarded as sizable? And what if something like the normal returns, even if it's not the same as before? And what if business and social activities have moved online and are staying there? And what if there's a growing respect for public institutions and medical expertise with a new appreciation for reliable direction with future pandemics to occur? And what if we come out this lockdown? Street life returns, a new appreciation for all our friends and jobs and businesses, and even the loss of some businesses remind us not to take things for granted as we know it. In this scenario, ladies and gentlemen, the only wave of COVID-19, what we experienced early in 2020, is diminishing sometime in the year, and the subsiding of the wave might vary geographically and might depend on what mitigation measures are placed and how they are actually eased, depending on the height of the wave peak. The good scenario could see all the required subsequent relaxation of mitigation measures diminish completely over the next 2 to 3 months. So the aftermath of this good scenario, ladies and gentlemen, what we will experience in this scenario, no future peaks of any COVID-19 or any related diseases. 50 to 60% globally will be tested for COVID-19. And in the good scenario, the best case is 6 million people globally will be affected by COVID-19 and will experience 500,000 deaths. And it ends somewhere in 2020. And the new social solutions created in healthcare for elderly and children are urgently addressed. Science and technology becomes cornerstone of societies. Investment in new sectors, education, technology, startups accelerates a new era of growth with the 4IR. And we experience a capacity gain to respond to future coronaviruses or other zoonotic outbreaks like eating bats, for instance. from an economic perspective, remember the slide I showed you guys in terms of economics, we'll have a V-shaped economic recovery through radical economic and best case financial models. Banking systems lends money to drive the global recovery, and the best case will see a decline of 3% economic GDP in 2020, and in the best case a 2% decline in 2021. What we experience in the best case scenario is G7 and G20 countries working together with the African Union and other Asian countries. And the World Health Organization ups its game. So we find general perspective, a global coordinated effort. And a positive rate of change generated in the contemporary times and accelerated opportunity for 4IR, and people are assisted in the capacity to go digital. People will eventually save money as governments help companies at the end of the day to survive. Public-private partnerships becomes the new norm. As we experience South Africa, we only have 36 public-private partnerships. And as we know from the Commission on the 4IR, there's a need between 500 and 600 in the country. But globally, countries and governments are trying to assist businesses to also get back onto their feet. So public-private partnerships, and that collaboration takes form. And even the best case leaves a hole in global pockets for the coming months. Globalization still thrives in this best case or in the good scenario in a world that is interconnected and independent. And the critical assessment of value of basic assumptions is encouraged by the economic transformation and postmodern critique of assumption about history, civilization, and growth. And a new economic relationships unfolds and begs the question, how many of the present arrangements will survive or recover after the peak of the endemic? And things we do not know presently are finally clarified, such as the true infections of SARS-CoV, and eventually we find out all the information that we need to know, where it started, how it's affecting, so it becomes more clearer for us as we move forward. From a society perspective, normality resists the consideration of wider use of alternative futures approaches, in even restricts what is acceptable in the present. And we realize that we will not return to normal because normal was the problem. And the capacity to see the real potential impact of the pandemic will somehow realize that business as usual world will not do. And the post-normal reality forces the world to reset as all accumulated uncertainty is cleared or resolved one way or another, and over time our societies will have developed sophisticated cognitive processes to understand our societies better and the world we live in. And lastly, we realize that it's time to think the unthinkable and put more effort into comprehensive global history and empower humanity to decide collectively what kind of future we actually want. From a business perspective, ladies and gentlemen, lockdown and confinement measures make people realize, describe and explain the actual work context to which countries have been dependent on for labor of low-wage workers. And many took accepted very long shifts, some without pay, many volunteering without hesitation. And it's truly becoming a community effort. And the need to coordinate global responses was more and more urgent. And an environmental and a good scenario, ladies and gentlemen, the new global environment agenda is tied to economic agendas and global efforts to a more environmental awareness. Aviation and transport industries, as we know it, change to new technologies. And futurists and foresight practitioners flourish as they prepare nations for the new norm as we know it. And preliminary figures demonstrate improvements in the quality of air, water, atmosphere as a result of this economic slowdown. COVID-19, some might say, might be Mother Earth's rejoiner. In a bad scenario, ladies and gentlemen, where we will experience economic stabilization, poor containment of COVID-19, the fact is we ask the same questions asked around the globe. What if the pandemic lasts longer than mankind anticipated, with 2 waves of infection lasting well into 21 and 22? What if we are kept in crisis mode for many more months, with prolonged recessions, with supply and demand worries, with financial system shocks, and social and economic pressures? What if not all countries suffer the same economic degree to those which faced the pandemic sooner and reacted more aggressively to economic recovery faster, whilst those slower countries are hurt more severely and for longer. What if, ladies and gentlemen, virtual life becomes a real life in most countries and businesses alike? And what if companies that still invest accelerate investments in 4IR, robotics, and smart business models to reduce the reliance on human labor that is subject to the diseases? And what if the need to rebuild economies and restart consumption favor policies that promote getting people back only in 2021? In this scenario, the bad scenario, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 is followed by a larger wave later on in this year in 2020. And this then requires a reinstitution of lockdown mitigation measures, those bad experiences we experienced in the last 2 months, in an attempt to curtail the further spread of infection, prevent healthcare systems from being overwhelmed. And this pattern is similar to what we've seen during the 1957-1958 Asian pandemic that followed a similar pattern, with a smaller spring wave followed by a much larger wave. In this bad scenario, the recovery is slow in early 2022 and speeds up in the second half in 2023. We also experience in this scenario, China's economy rebounds slowly, deep and prolonged recession in the West affects supply chains and consumer demands, and fiscal stimulus limits business failures but does not boost spending as we know it. In this bad scenarios, ladies and gentlemen, we'll experience a W-shaped recovery. GDP suffers as more and more cases paralyze economies around the world, including South Africa. And the long-term price for COVID-19 is only emerging as we know it. And the second peak follows, but no further outbreaks after the second one. In a bad scenario, 8 million COVID-19 cases, 1 million global deaths. Vaccine is only 10 to 16 months away. Dealing with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and leverage partners in screening technology. And we are building capacity in nations. 4IR vertical farms, 3D printing and AI. Even though it's eventually success in developing better antiviral treatments and vaccines, only the top 10 to 20% of the world's population benefit from the breakthroughs in the bad scenario. Vaccine production is also compromised by short-term capitalism and lack of strategic long-term response, and possibly a prolonged pandemic, and a need to learn to navigate it, because mankind in the world, we learn as we go on. And for COVID-19, we cannot resort to medicine alone. The need to add health systems management, logistics, psychology, network management, and engineering, and in time. And the ability to test citizens regularly and effectively has remained beyond the capacity of governments in much of the developing world. And COVID-19 cases in this bad scenario, ladies and gentlemen, show how abrupt and discontinuous change actually can be. From the economy breakdown, aid packages and lockdown economy under huge stress. And the world experienced a 5 trillion loss just in growth towards 2022. And governments and cities all lose tax and rates, and poverty levels actually increase globally. Unemployment rises globally, 90% worse since the Great Depression from the late 2020s. And jobs are gone, but focus on new jobs and sectors. And the economy only bounces back after 24 to 36 months. And the virus has an impact across a whole range of sectors, from economy and international finance to health service, employment, food production, and manufacturing. And the virus exacerbates complexity stress by restricting travel and freedom of movement upon which the system is dependent. And many cities have no contingency or economic recovery plans for the pandemic, simply because they have done no planning. And although the official global priority was to deal with public health crisis, ladies and gentlemen, it soon became clear that the real priority is now to get the economies going and to get back into business as soon as possible. And fears of immigration, job losses, cultural diffusion are exacerbated by further lockdowns and economic contractions as we know it. The global devolution left each country to look after itself. And the collapse of the Greek, French, Italian, Spanish, and several other economies resulted in a collapse of any resemblance of cooperation between central banks and national finance ministers as we know it. Governments, therefore, eventually realized that the necessity anticipated which trends might reach breaking points, turning points, and transformations so that countries can anticipate for themselves. From a society perspective, social distancing is for the privileged, as we're experiencing it in South Africa. And socially, we're all in this together, and economic recovery depends on screening processes as we move forward. And the current pandemic precipitates a deep systematic crisis that could force us to undertake several lifestyle changes. Businesses, as we know it, however, the economic crisis really cannot be managed by business as usual or by standard procedures. And it appears that humanity has lost the capacity to engage in long-term visioning and planning. And a dominant strategy in this scenario, ladies and gentlemen, is the world could best be described as focus on today's problem and let tomorrow take for itself. In the last scenario, the ugly scenario, ladies and gentlemen, where we experience poor containment of COVID-19 and worsening economic downturn. Once again, the what-if questions in the ugly scenario. What if we underestimated the future role of COVID-19 and other epidemics? And what if the countries, including South Africa, that seems to have things under control today, face various rollouts of further epidemics? What if certain countries still struggling today find the pandemic outruns every effort of containment? And what if mankind discovers the world is just too big as the virus cycles of infections recur between nations and economies with whom they trade? And what if the most expansive fiscal and monetary interventions in history fall actually short? And what if societies begin to shut down as healthcare systems simply become overloaded? In the ugly scenario, ladies and gentlemen, the first wave of COVID-19 is followed by several ongoing transmissions and cases occurrence in a pattern of several waves. Again, these patterns might vary, and while the third and fourth wave patterns was not seen as a past infodemics, it remains a reality for COVID-19. There's likely to continue to occur at an accelerating rate in the ugly scenario, and the epidemic continues with several severe infection rates into 2023 until either crowd immunity and or vaccine reduces virality. Economic recovery will only take up until mid-2027. And the prognosis around the bad scenario is a significant risk of cascading outbreaks with feedback loops, limiting recovery, global financial system breakdowns, despite global central banks' efforts, and many businesses collapse and household disruptions occur. Just in an ugly scenario, global economic depression kicks in, lasting for years. We'll eventually experience an L-shaped recovery, but the economy never fully recovers in the following 10 years. The World Health Organization, United Nations still have no say. We can experience 3 to 6 COVID-19 peaks before 2023. Multiple waves of viruses cause governments and cities to implement multiple lockdowns. No vaccine is found unless 10% of people are tested. Nevertheless, the body count of COVID-19 pandemic makes it painfully clear that adjusting is very, very difficult thing to do. From an economic perspective, economic calamity inevitable, even though governments commit trillions of dollars. Complexity, contradictions, and chaos have always been around, but they will be converging and feeding each other in ways that are unique and unpredictable. Once again, the L-shaped economic recovery, global 6% decline in GDP in 2020 and a 2% decline in 2021. But we'll find that the more developed countries will have a 20% decline in the US and a 14% decline in GDP in the UK and Europe. And in this case, 10 million people will actually have COVID-19 globally and will experience 2 million deaths. And it continues well into 2023. We'll experience in this the blame game between the East and the West. And then in this worst case scenario, the ugly scenario, no economic demand for products and service after lockdown for a further 36 months. We can expect cut in revenue expectations of budgets as part of economic depression. And there's a big problem in access to loans around the world for businesses to survive, and company pulls out of foreign countries. And the global system is not even close to a system of governance. It's still a wild west of nation states, not unified, but separated by territorial integrity, tenuous sovereignty. And we'll experience rising unemployment, crime, further diseases, hunger, poverty, outward migration, refugees. Science and technology, as we notice, flow as more and more attacks occur, and World Health Organizations and other healthcare advisors fall wrong models. Countries with no money look after themselves only, and hungry nations, as we know it, are brought to their knees and borders are closed, and trade eventually comes to a halt, ladies and gentlemen. In this scenario, you'll also experience a VIP economy, where bargain hunters take advantage of property prices and cash actually becomes king. From a societal perspective, hospitals and healthcare services do not cope at all or fail, and developing and most in the hungry, weakest countries succumb. And we'll experience a challenge of being able to identify which level of uncertainty is being addressed and then applying the right ignorance. This is a demanding challenge. Last two slides, ladies and gentlemen, some final thoughts on the scenario planning efforts. The reason why we do scenario planning efforts is the prescription of uncertain futures, because there's more than one future, is to focus on resilience to withstand uncertainties and shocks. By building focused, specific growth strategies, by adopting and enhancing fourth industrial revolution, as well as technical and innovation competencies, smart business models, and by emphasizing sustainability and by being proactively cooperative. And the focus, ladies and gentlemen, should be on the drivers for long-term, not short-term sympathetic message, and initiating action rather than just reacting to developments as they come. Just some food for thought on the last slide. Based on the Asian flu pandemic of 1957, this outbreak is likely to only last for another 10 to 18 months. And it is likely that the outbreak won't entirely be halted globally until 60 to 70% of our population is somehow immune. And governments, including South Africa and our health authorities, should at least plan for the worst case scenario, including no vaccine availability. Government officials should therefore develop concrete economic recovery plans, including triggers for reinstituting mitigating measures for dealing with any or other future diseases and peaks that might occur. Thank you very much. Over to you, Kobus.
Absolutely, that's awesome. You know, as with all these things that you shared, you know, going around in my head, there's so much, and how do one now kind of succinctly make sense of all of this? And so we're really appreciative of the long time you've spent in the analysis part of all of this to come and share with us these three scenarios. And I mean, we could have gone on for the entire day around this. It's fascinating stuff. You know, on the one hand, one tends to be filled with anxiety, but then we're also reminded, as you've noted, that to be proactive in this and rather be part of creating the solutions and being part of creating that future that we would want, instead of you know, just be passive recipients of whatever is dealt towards us. But Chris, there's three questions that came up that I would like to pose to you. The one by Sam that said, assuming COVID-19 is a black elephant, how and when was it policymakers, especially in South Africa, and are there countries that acknowledged the threat and responded accordingly?
I must be honest, the biggest issue is that we're still divided as a society, whether this is a black swan or whether this actually is a black elephant. And I honestly believe that this is a black elephant. There's been so many prognoses around the world, including Professor Sohail Inayatullah and UNESCO and the efforts in terms of research, that this is not a black swan, not at all. You know, I don't know if you've seen that video clip with President Barack Obama when he was indicating this about 5 years ago, that we need, as countries, we need to prepare ourselves for this. And even in my previous book that I wrote in 2020 about the future of South Africa, possible scenarios, myself and Des Collier, we've indicated pandemics coming to the fore. It's nothing new that countries, we've been impending this stock market crisis is building up and building up and building up, and mitigating measures around the world to stop it, There are various indicators, and you know, this oil price war and COVID-19 accelerated, and finally, you know, we were brought around our knees. The big question that we pose as futurists: what if that forecast, the second wave of COVID-19 comes in? Then we truly, and in true reality, Cobus, we've only seen a glimpse of what the stock market's going to do in the future. So it's how best we prepare as a country. I do believe, from a South African perspective, we are sort of, you know, our leaders. We've got a fantastic presidency, and 4IR orientated, supported by our Minister of Communication, a fantastic lady, jacked up, those kind of things. It's just extremely sad that now communication becomes key within COVID-19, and our honorable minister is not there, so the communication efforts come to the fore. But I do believe that we as a country are somehow prepared, you know, for further outbreaks. You can look at the different municipalities around South Africa. We're sort of prepared for when the peak of COVID-19 will actually come to the fore. But I hope and pray to answer your question that this is more a black swan. This is more of a black elephant than it is a black swan.
Yeah, Chris, and this is personally me speaking, I concur with that view. But I also think that the human condition, if I may use that expression, plays a role. We've been made aware, you know, history has also shown us that we've often been made aware of things. If we just think about the underlying threats facing the future of our species from an environmental and a climate perspective, etc. But it's kind of, I just don't know. I think it's just the way we are. We only actually wake up, you know, when whatever this problem is, it falls into our laps. But any event, Chris, sorry, there's a next question there. The huge, from Miriam, the huge inequality in South Africa is a disturbing factor as far as 4IR. In your view, Prof, do you see South Africa closing the inequality gap in the short term, or are the structural inequalities too deep?
My biggest concern is our socialist, our nation. I firmly believe we've got too much of a dependency ratio, but how do we mitigate those measures? Exactly like you're asking, how do we bring that gap closer? The first and foremost thing is the digital divide, which is concerning for me. Thankfully, under our Minister of Communication and New Technologies, she has been negotiating with MTN, the Vodacom, to bring the data cost down. We've seen governments putting some fantastic measures, even providing students with laptops and cut the data costs and those kind of things. These are actually fantastic efforts to ensure, because, you know, we sort of need to cater for the next generation. And as we know, with the fourth industrial revolution, it becomes incredibly important, because, you know, we can't create digital intelligence if we don't set the platforms. And you see at the moment, drivers for change, the platform economy as we move forward. So I do believe, you know, and also with the 4IR under the leadership of the presidency, that we sort of can adopt these measures coming to the fore. So I'm very confident, I'm very positive, as it were, for what's actually coming. There's some exciting things coming to the fore under the great leadership of our president and the presidency. So I'm very confident and I'm hopeful, you understand. So we also realists as futurists, like, you know, we have to be realists. And I can confidently say I'm very excited what is actually going to come. On a short term, yes, we've got issues, we've got problems. COVID-19 has given us a lot to think about, but we're adapting. Mankind adapts. It's like Darwin's saying, it's not the strongest species as well. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. You know, and it's been age-old wisdom that comes through there. I mean, if you read the book, Why Nations Fail, you know, it's a 2,000-year history. And the biggest methodology that actually comes from out is how nations adapt to new inventions, new technologies, business moves forward. It's not like we're the only ones that experience it in our lifetime. It's been for thousands of years. You understand? So,
yeah.
I'm hopeful.
Thank you so much again, and colleagues, friends, those of you who visited us here in our virtual, I don't want to call it, it's our stadium, virtual stadium, where we, like the ancient Greeks also sat there, you know, sharing their wisdoms and so forth. So Chris, again, thank you so much to everyone who attended. Thank you so much. And let's part with being hopeful based on what Chris has also shared with us. Let's part with that, and let's part with the mantra that tomorrow is beautiful. We thank you, everybody, and looking forward to seeing you next time on this same station. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Kobus.